Hello and welcome to part 3 of the R1300GS series. So in this episode we're covering just one topic, which is comfort, and specifically rider and pillion. Now over the last 4 months that's probably been the number one question I've been asked both on the channel, via the comment section and via email. And specifically owners want to know that have the outgoing 1250, is the new bike as comfortable, more comfortable, or less comfortable than the outgoing 1250, and that is what we're going to try and answer today. So I have persuaded my wife to give up a whole weekend, and we've done a total of 8 hours testing, and I'll explain how we did the testing in a moment. But first, with regards to comfort, there are a couple of things I'd like to highlight to be completely open about how we assess comfort, because we all experience comfort in different ways. Now, I have a friend that has almost exactly the same bike as my R1250GS Rallye, and he absolutely hates my comfort seat, and he's got a standard seat. Now we have swapped seats and we both agree we don't like each other's seats. So a lot depends on our physical size, our weight, the shape of our bottoms, the sit bones, our coccyx bone. A lot does depend on how we are in terms of shape, size and weight. So one rider might like one seat and the next guy is not going to like it. So that's the first thing I want to highlight. The second thing is that the professional motorcycle reviewers, they're very, very good because they're constantly jumping from motorbike to motorbike to motorbike, and they've tested hundreds of different motorbikes. So they're often quite good at giving us a very quick impression of how comfortable a bike is from standard, with the standard seat or the comfort seat or the sport seat, whatever they've got fitted. But for those of us that have just one or maybe two bikes, it is quite difficult, because quite often we've done tens of thousands of miles with our motorbikes. Our bodies and our bottoms have got used to our seats, and then when we jump on something new, the whole thing feels very strange, and quite often we think that the seats are not as comfortable. But what really needs to happen is we need bum time on the seat to get used to it, for our bottoms to get used to the new style of seat. So that's the second thing. So the third thing is that with seats, they do take time to bed in, to break in. And my experience is that it's going to take you between 500 and 800 kilometers of ride time to really get this seat to soften up, because that foam does go through a breaking in process, especially with the rear. So the passenger is going to need to spend some bum time on that for that foam to soften up to be at its most comfortable. So that's the third thing. So how did we do our testing? Well, as I just mentioned, my wife gave up a weekend. What we decided to do was on the Saturday, we went out on the 1300 first. We did one of our 2-hour routes, which is on fairly smooth, beautifully flat roads. We then came back, we had a 1-hour break, and then we went back out on my 1250. We did exactly the same route at the same speed, and then we came back. So my wife did 4 hours of riding, and then I asked her to write down her thoughts and observations between the two bikes. But to be fair in the way that we were testing, what we also did on the Sunday, we went back out again and did another 4 hours of testing. But importantly, what we did this time, we started on the 1250, we went out and we did a completely different route on different road surfaces. They're actually quite poor road surfaces, and I'll put some clips up. So we did 2 hours, we came back the same as the day before, we had a 1-hour break, and then we went back out on the 1300 on the same route at the same speed, and then when we got back I asked my wife to write down her thoughts again. Was there any differences from the previous day? So in a moment I'll ask my wife to come and join us to tell us and share with us her thoughts on pillion comfort, and then I'll also tell you what I think of this. So I would like to introduce for the first time Sandra, my wife, who has graciously given up a long weekend. Today is Sunday. We've just done our second day of testing, and we did a whole day of testing yesterday. So as I mentioned earlier, 2 hours on the 1300, hours break, back out, 2 hours on the 1250. That's what we did yesterday. And today all we've really changed is the order in which we do it and the roads that we ride on. So we started on the 1250, 2 hours, 1 hour break, back out on the 1300.
But before we get into all of this, I would like to say two things.
Okay.
I didn't sacrifice anything. I mean, riding motorbikes is a lovely thing, whether as a pillion or as a driver myself. So it was a lovely pleasure to be on the bikes with you. And the other thing was, I insisted that the Carl would not tell me anything what to expect, because I wanted to form my own opinion. For the first time in a long time, thinking about Carl's new video, I didn't watch anything about the 1300. I didn't listen to anything about the 1300 because I knew that he wanted my opinion. So I said, I don't want to know. I want to form my own opinion. So that's what we did.
So I got told right at the beginning, don't tell me anything. So first of all then, so we set off on this yesterday morning.
Yeah.
What were your impressions as a completely new, fresh motorbike?
My first look at the new 1300, my first glance was, I was surprised and thought, okay, this looks a lot smaller, a lot narrower. And that's what I expected when I got on the back. So I expected a different feeling, but it wasn't much different. It was surprisingly easier to get on. It was lower, there was a smaller step for me to make, so that was a nice surprise, which initially I thought, okay, this really is smaller. But then the other leg went over, I sat down and I thought, no, actually, there's not much difference in terms of dimensions, of the width of everything. It all felt very similar.
Yeah. So what this means is, for a lot of us, it still rides like a GS. It still feels like a GS. But in terms of the get-go, when we get started, with this adaptive vehicle height control set into auto, which lowers front and rear, it is, both from the rider's position and the Pillion's position, so much easier for you to get on.
Yes, so mounting a lot easier. When I sat down on the Pillion seat, I thought, well, this does feel a bit different, but as it's a testing bike, I don't think that seat has been bedded in yet.
No, that's important. So I mentioned right at the beginning, so this actually does have, surprisingly, the comfort seat versions. We know that the rider seat, because this bike had already done 1,000 odd kilometres when I picked it up, so the rider seat is definitely bed in, but the Pillion seat, we don't know whether anybody spent any bum time on that, so it might well be that it needs bedding in and breaking in. We just don't know. And I tried to find out, but no one could tell me whether a Pillion had been on the back of this particular bike before I got it.
So when I got on yesterday morning, I thought, well, Carl told me there was a comfort seat on here. Clearly this is not a comfort seat. Those were my thoughts. So we have mounting, we have positioning behind you. That was really very, very similar. And no comfort seat was my thought. The next thing, handlebars. Why do I keep saying handlebars? Grab handles.
Yes. I have handlebars, you have grab handles.
Yeah, but on the other bike I have handlebars as well. Handlebars. So grab handles.
Grab handles.
It felt a bit strange, but then I just thought I hadn't been on the bike for a long time, possibly that's the reason. But then I actually felt it's a different shape. And what I felt was when you put your hand in or on it, it's not this nice round shape, which is on the 1250. It feels a bit edgy, a bit hard. Yeah. And then we figured out there actually is a gap underneath.
Yeah, so the ones on the 1300, to help with BMW getting a much lighter bike, they are injection molded plastic, and there is a hollow underneath the grab handle to make them much lighter. When you compare that to the 1250, which are solid metal, it is, in terms of grabbing, quite a bit of difference. And if you've got, what you found out was if you wear your summer gloves, you can really feel the difference.
Yes.
But we also tried today with winter gloves, and the difference is less.
Yes, that makes this one more easy to bear. So winter gloves do make it more comfortable, but still it felt a bit odd. But also it's the angle. This has a slightly different angle which feels a bit less natural. Whereas on here, let's swap around again and get to my beloved bike, your beloved bike, sorry. When you grab around here, no matter summer gloves, winter gloves, it just feels easy, nice, shapely, and a natural angle for me to hold on to.
Okay, so your initial impressions then on this was it was easy to get on. Grab handles were okay, but not brilliant. There's a difference in the shape of the grab handles. and in terms of comfort you were expecting more. So then we came back, we had our 1 hour break, and you haven't mentioned it, but I'll just remind you, you did say at the end of the 2 hours you were looking...
Oh, was I ready to get off? I still thought, why did he tell me there were comfort seats on there? They weren't.
Yeah. So she was actually looking forward to getting off the bike because we have an intercom system as well, and when we came back for your 1 hour break, she was very pleased about it. So then jumping on this for the afternoon, what were your thoughts?
Well, I thought this is a comfort seat, but I'm again getting ahead of myself. Mounting, this was as expected then from me. Harder to get, well, not harder to get on, but it's a bigger step. You have to lift your foot higher, and so that's a bit harder to get on. Yeah. But then I sat down and thought, yes, this is a comfort seat. And so I can't imagine that this is just about the bedding in. This is just way more comfortable. Yeah. And again, a confirmation of what I thought earlier in terms of positioning behind my husband. It was fine. I could look over his shoulder. That was fine. Not an awful lot of buffeting, not a lot of wind noise. So it's a nice protected place to be. And we then found out a confirmation of our handlebars that...
Grab handles.
Grab handles. That's the word of the video. They are just...
We're going to leave that in, by the way.
Round.
Grab handles.
The grab handles are just more rounded in a more natural angle, and it is just very easy to hold on to them.
Okay. So one more thing that we just need to touch on, we haven't talked about, and that is suspension. So for the 1300 we set the ride mode to road, the suspension mode to road, and the DSA setting to 0. So this was almost as comfortable as you can get it. And on the 1250 we went back to our normal 2-up touring mode, which is ride mode road, suspension mode road, automatic preload on the rear. So just so that we clarify this, yesterday we were on super smooth roads. Today we had lots of really poor surface B roads, which we went looking for to see what they're like, because this is what you encounter on holiday. If you could isolate your thoughts between the two in terms of seat and grab handles, what were your thoughts on suspension? Yesterday first, on the super smooth roads. Yesterday,
flat roads, and I thought, well, actually, there's not that much of a difference. That was a comfortable place to be. It felt a bit more sporty, but it felt fine. The big difference came today with the other road surfaces, and getting on the bumpy roads, boy, was there a difference. This really gives me the impression of being like isolated from the road. I know the roads that we were on. I know them as a pillion and as a rider, and I knew sort of what to expect. But on here, I couldn't feel them. It was like, I can't describe it different than saying isolated.
Well, I think that's correct. I think what we took away from this is that not only is there a difference in terms of comfort coming from the seat, that's much better for the pillion, and I'll come to me in a moment, but in terms of ultimate, super supple, comfortable suspension on really poor roads, that is better than this one. I mean, this is, on those flat roads, this was a lovely, nice, sporty rider. And for me as a rider, even in ride mode road, there's quite a bit of control. And the 1250 does move around if we go a bit quicker, whereas the 13 doesn't. But we just want to highlight one last thing before we finish. Comfort is a very individual thing.
Of course.
You may actually find these seats, which are the comfort seats, to be super comfortable, and a lot depends on your body shape, size, and a lot of other factors, and that does have an influence about how we feel about seats. And also, we mustn't discount the fact that we've done thousands of kilometers 2-up on that bike, and we both love it, and we get really comfortable very quickly, and even after a long day we're not complaining about feeling uncomfortable on the seats, which unfortunately we can't say for this one.
No.
Okay, let's move on. So now Sandra has shared her thoughts on the R1300 in terms of comfort, and we've done a bit of a comparison between the two bikes over the last 2 days, and we've done about 8 hours on the bikes in total. What are my thoughts in terms of ultimate comfort on the new R1300? Well, the first thing I would say, if tomorrow morning I had to get on one of these bikes and go from here, my home in Germany, back to the UK for a meeting, it is in fact just over 1,000 kilometres, 1,033 kilometres door to door. And my choice would be the 1300, because dynamically it is so much different and so much better than the outgoing 1250, and with that new screen setup, with the wind protection, the no buffeting, the no noise, it's a lovely place to be on the autobahns and the motorways. And then of course we've got all those additional rider assistance, the radar assisted blind spot detection and the cruise control. Then you think about the increases in performance and the gearbox that have been improved, and just everything, it all adds up. This is the bike that I would take. But if I was going to go on a 3-week tour and I had to make a decision tomorrow morning, yeah, that's going to be a slightly different decision because of the seats. So before I talk about the seats, let me just explain where BMW have pitched these, because it is important to understand where these two bikes have been pitched in terms of their dynamic capabilities. So the original 1200, not this one, the 1250, the original 1200, and what I'll do, I'll put some graphics on the screen to help you understand. So over on this side, we've got comfort, ultimate comfort. Over here, we've got ultimate performance in terms of sports bike riding, sports bike suspension. So we've got these two extremes, comfort and performance. Now, the original 1200 had a dynamic capability in terms of what you could do with the bike, and it was really quite a wide dynamic range, and they plumped it smack in the middle between comfort and performance. And that is why the GS was and has been top of the adventure market segment for about a decade. Now, when the 1250 came out, in particular with the 2021 onwards bike, with the changes to the dynamic ESA, the breadth of its capability increased by about 5%. So it was a more rounded, more capable bike. But what BMW did is they shifted that performance range a little bit over to that side towards the performance end of the market. But it didn't really compromise in terms of this end with comfort, because they're both very, very, very similar, the 1200 and the 1250. But with the new 1300, because of the new suspension, which we covered in the last episode with the EVO suspension on the front and the EVO Telelever and the vehicle ride height control system, the dynamic range that the 1300 has grown considerably. It's probably grown by about 25%. But importantly, what BMW have done with that increased range, they've shifted it quite considerably towards the sports bike end of the market. And it is very noticeable. So for those of you that are looking for a more sporty ride, this is an incredible bike. But what's happened is, at the bottom of that range, where they've moved its capabilities over, it's lost just a tiny, tiny little bit in terms of suspension quality and that lovely, supple, soft ride that we're all used to on the 1250. Now, I think that if you were to get on this bike and you don't have a 1250, you're not going to notice any issues. It is a comfortable place to be. It is only when, like we've done this weekend, we've just done back-to-back testing between the two bikes, and we both agree in terms of ultimate comfort, this is the bike to be on. But I think quite a margin of that is down to the seats. So with the new 1300, what we had, these, if you go back and watch the beginning of the episode, BMW were very good, and they made sure that this bike came as requested with comfort seats, rider and pillion. So it's got the comfort seats. But on the bottom of the seat, you have this paddle assembly, and I'll try and show you this here, and you can flip this lever over, and what it does is it increases and gives you about another 15 or 20 millimeters of height on the back of the seat. But by including the paddle assembly and all that mechanism inside that seat, they've got reduced space for foam. So when you compare the new comfort seat with the comfort seat of the 1250, it is very different, because on the old 1250 we had a height adjustment, so we could have the seat at 870 or its standard height of 850, and of course we could also then move the front of the seat, the back of the seat, and we could have various different positions. which then, in terms of seat designers, left them lots of room to get lots of dual density, super comfortable foam on the seat. So for me and my wife, we both feel that the comfort seats on the 1250 are superior in terms of the comfort and the support they provide compared to the 1300. And we didn't really start to notice it until you get to about an hour and a half into a ride. And whereas on our 1250, you could do a whole day and not think about your bottom on the seat at all. After about an hour and a half, 2 hours, I was starting to move around on the seat, and my wife also found that she was also beginning to have to move around on the seat to try and get comfortable. So I think ultimately with the new GS8 that might come out later this year, this is a great opportunity for BMW to make a bit of an improvement, because the GS8 is going to be focused at those riders going on really big adventures. And I think there's an opportunity here to improve the seat. It's just a shame that I couldn't get from the press office the Comfort Tall seat, which might actually bring both bikes back into balance, and I haven't had it, so I can't comment on it. And of course, if I was going to buy this bike, I would have to sort out the seat, and of course if I couldn't do that within BMW's own range of seat options, then of course there's seats from the other manufacturers like Wunderlich and Sargent, and they all make really very good seats, so I'd have to try a couple of seats. Anyway, I hope that is of some help for you today. There is another episode still to come, although we are at the end today of what was the plan 2 weeks from the press office with this bike. They've been very generous and they've extended the time I've got the bike, because I'd like to make at least one more video, because the dynamic capabilities of this bike are just quite incredible, and I want to cover that in one more episode. Anyway, thank you very much for your time today, and I'll see you soon for another episode. Bye-bye.